I didn't see that.
It's not done yet. They should have held out for at least 1 year of healthcare.
So, I would like to make the deal that they're making. 8 Democrats are breaking rank. 8 Democrats who aren't up for another 2 or... Yes, they're gonna break rank, vote to reopen through January 31st on the promise that the Republicans will vote on Obamacare extensions in mid-December.
Yeah, that's not gonna happen. There's no way.
How stupid are they?
At least negotiate and keep the healthcare stuff for 1 year, which gives them time to go and negotiate and hash it out.
All right, good evening. We'll call the Finance Committee meeting for November 10th, 2025 to order. First item on the agenda, courtesy of the floor, public comment on any agenda item. Seeing none, we'll move to, there's no discussion items. We'll move to our information item, 3.01, budget update.
Oh, I guess the mic was on the whole time. Sorry. This is our budget update. So we thought we'd take a look at where we projected to be. Next slide, Jamie. In terms of the current year budget, and when and if the state passes a budget, we can always make the update. But just a reminder of where we started as we built out the budget for 25-26. So we had 100% of the governor's basic ed and special ed proposals, 50% of the adequacy proposal. We did not make any adjustments to cyber charter reform, and we plan to use $5.7 million of our fund balance to balance our budget. So putting that into number perspective, next slide, Jamie. You can see where we were projecting $56 million in basic ed, $6.7 million in ready to learn, and $10.3 million in special ed. I just want to pause here to highlight the increases in basic ed and special ed are 1% and 2%. Why is that important? Because that's the piece that actually touches on all the school districts across the Commonwealth. Adequacy is more or less based on a court ruling that specifically touches on those underfunded school districts. Fortunately or unfortunately, we get some money because of the adequacy investment, but not all districts benefit from that. So as of today, we still don't have a state budget. So what does that mean? That means all those numbers are hypothetical. And if we use last year's numbers, we have over $33 million in funding that's delayed as a result of the budget impasse. Fortunately, we rely about 70% of our state dollars, of our local taxpayer dollars to manage operations, and therefore currently we are operating as normal. If this thing continues to December and we still don't have a state budget, we would at that point have lost out on $51 million of potential funding, or at least delay in $51 million of funding. That's an impact of $530,000 in interest. And at that point, it starts putting some real strain on our budget and the ability to operate. So while we're doing status quo currently, operating as is, we go past December, we're going to need some sort of financing in the form of a TRAN because we would have started to utilize our unassigned fund balance. This is an updated cash flow that shows exactly what I'm talking through. And what I want to point out is we burn through about 35 to 40 million a month. So as we get into December, we'll have 66 million. That number jumps down to under 30 in January. Come February, you'll be looking at $8 million, which barely gets you to half of a month. So
Karen?
if things don't change, I'm sorry, Dr. Silva.
Karen?
Just a quick point of clarification on the prior slide, or just to take a minute to say it one more time, because like this one, I read this one a few times. So as of right this minute, local taxpayers here in Bethlehem Area School District are out over $300,000 because instead of having money received into the district, sitting in our account, earning interest, that money is still in Harrisburg.
Correct.
And that will grow to $500,000 if we're still in the same position in December. Just want to make sure. Those monies, the interest we earn on dollars in our budget that are sitting in our accounts as they're waiting to be spent as we lay out in our budget, I'm assuming those interest earnings get put into the classroom, into our facilities, into our fund balance. Like, those are not pretend dollars that we won't miss. That's real money.
That's 100% correct. And if we look at what's saved us the past couple of years, it's been the record earnings on our investments. So this money makes its way directly into the classroom and helps us offset the use of our fund balance when we go through year end.
And I don't know if there's any protocol, sorry, just one last thing, just as a quick follow-up. I don't know if there's any protocol or if this has been done in prior sort of delayed budgets, because that interest is getting earned. It's getting earned wherever the money is currently sitting. Sort of Bethlehem Area School District dollars are sitting in Harrisburg, earning money or earning interest in Harrisburg. Is there any protocol for allocating interest earned in addition to monies delayed to districts? Because those dollars, again, those are local taxpayer dollars. Those are local school district dollars. And it's just sort of insult to injury that these are not insignificant dollars. These will be $500,000 by the time I get to December. Just, I was curious about that.
Not that I'm aware of.
No.
So I'd have to do some research and get back to you. But I could tell you that's even more true when you think about the federal dollars, because those dollars, in fact, have been appropriated and are sitting in the state earning interest, not making its way down to us because of the way the fiscal code is. In terms of the state dollars, I'm going to say I'm new to the school district world in PA, so my caveat. But in terms of the state dollars, until there's a fiscal code, it can't be appropriated. And therefore, I don't know if we can make the argument that it belongs to the schools until there's some sort of some sort of a budget deal.
You know, part of the cost of the district definitely is in lost interest income that we would have accrued if we had had state funding all along. But a lot of it is also operational costs where we've had to have Plan A, Plan B, Plan C as pots of money may or may not be available. So things that we might wanted to have done in the educational programs world or in pupil services or facilities are just sort of frozen in place with all of this indecision. In a way, it's similar to a business when it's looking at increasing prices with tariffs. There is a cost of being frozen in place beyond lost interest income.
So we're financially healthy. We're continuing to operate status quo, but that health isn't going to last too much into next year. And so just an updated look at what our balance will be. And again, in January, if all things continue as is, we're likely going to be in front of this board asking for permission to go out for a tran. And keep in mind, that's also the time frame we're going to be looking at our next borrowing for Fountain Hill Elementary School. There will be two completely separate transactions as we move forward. So, oh, sure.
Before you get too far, when we're talking about the December deadline, are we talking December 1st or December 31st?
Well, technically December 31st,
Thank you.
because we would come back in January for board approval.
Yes, but that doesn't, we're not that fiscal year. That's just in the calendar year.
That's just a
month.
calendar year. It
Yeah.
happens to align with our cash flow right now.
Thank you.
So again, going into budget season, it helps to look at some of the trends. It helps to know how well our crystal ball has been working, because we're going to put our crystal ball on and essentially try to project out into the future. So looking at the first couple of years, essentially I did a pre-COVID and then a post-COVID. You can see where we've budgeted, and then it came in slightly lower in terms of the actuals. Again, we budgeted a certain number, it came in slightly lower in terms of the actual on the revenue side. As we move post-COVID, 22, 23, and beyond, we can see that the actuals are starting to exceed what we budgeted. Two main reasons for that. One, the economy has taken off much more than people would have projected. Two, the state has invested historical dollars year after year after year, and no different than what we're seeing today. We don't know what the state budget is when we pass our own budget. So we do have to make some assumptions. We do have to make some projections. In all cases, we're reasonably close, I'd say within 2.5%. So we're within the margin of error anyway. But more so recently than in the past, we're going into this with very limited to no view into what's coming our way. And it's coupled with a lot of the uncertainty that we've been facing throughout the pandemic. So steady increases on the local side, you can see that, and Jamie, go to the next slide. Primarily driven by interest rates, which has helped versus budget to actual, primarily driven by real estate revenue, which again helps budget to actual. Nice steady increase, so the trend line is good. We're seeing about 1.5% to 2% in terms of the local revenues. When you go to the state side, again, focus more so on the first three columns, you can see somewhat marginal, I would almost argue relatively flat growth on the state side. This aligns with the 1% and 2% that we discussed earlier. Post 21-22, you can see the historical revenue year after year after year. The main question becomes, at what point does that start to level out again? Again, lots of unknowns, lots of uncertainty. But given the timing of the budget, oftentimes we're left guessing. So, because we're left guessing, we make a little bit of assumptions. Using our trend lines, we can see that their local tax dollars are increasing approximately 1.5% per year. That's without any tax increases. Based on the strength of the economy, we're seeing EIT increase by 2% per year. Basic ed and special ed will go back to historical 2% and 1%, and we're not projecting any sort of a fair funding or adequacy formula into the base moving forward. So the 6.7 that we budgeted for, which may or may not come to fruition, we're building that into the base and saying that that's it. In terms of federal funding, based on what we know today, we're assuming flat funding for Title I, and it's very likely that Title II to IV will be eliminated. Throwing that into our model for the state projections first, again, what we're looking at is past the 25-26 point line. You can see where it starts to level out. In fact, it's just the historical pieces that we're adding 1% and 2%. So a nice increase at the very least, but nowhere near what we've seen over the past couple of years. Put that into the overall picture for revenue, you can see a healthy increase year over year, mostly driven by local dollars, second by the state, and then federal, again, has remained flat, so there's really no change on that end. Overall, based on the trend line, we're looking at 1.5% to 2% increase year over year. Any questions before I move on to the expenses? Okay, great.
Just real quick to clarify, because if people are curious, the legend starts at 175 million, and so if that line went all the way down to zero, you'd see that those local revenues account for a majority of our overall revenue budget. But just to clarify, here it looks like the state contributes more than half, and that's just because of the way the graph reads.
Yeah, it's just a graph, and you'll notice sometimes the graphs are a little inconsistent. If I start to zero, then the state and federal looks very small, and you can't really see it. So 70% of it is local dollars.
Not the worst thing.
What am I saying?
It's the reality of the chart.
So you can't really talk expenses, one more, Jamie, without looking at the budget cost drivers. Our biggest expenses, as you would expect, salary benefits, about 65% of our budget. That's followed very closely by tuition, and I broke up tuition in terms of tuition to charter schools and tuition to our local partners, whether it be the community college, the IU, or BAVITS. Last line on there is debt service, which then leaves you with 35 million. Sounds like a big number, but it's less than 10% for discretionary spending. So the reality is, while we can control a lot of the discretionary, there's not a whole lot of wiggle room in those expenses.
So Harry, 20% of our budget is serving students other than in the 22 schools in the Bethlehem Area School District, unless some of those IU students are in our schools.
Yep. And when you look at the cost drivers by category, no surprise, you could see, next line, Jamie. Everything is being spent, 65% is in instruction, which means in the classroom. Instruction support is at 27%, and your other category is primarily your debt service. So most every dollar we spent, 60, 70, 80, 91 cents to the dollar that we spent is going into the classroom or to support the classroom. Very similar to what we did with the revenue side. I wanted to get a sense of how well we've been budgeting or how efficient we are and where the variances are. This is more or less for lessons learned purposes. So same exact format, 1920, our budget was slightly higher than what our actual results came in. 2021, same picture. As we get towards the more recent years, you can see we're lining up almost identical to what the budget has been. This doesn't mean we budgeted perfectly. It just means that we were able to come in relatively close to what we thought would happen with a few creative budget transfers. But at the end of the day, we didn't exceed any of our expense projections. So being within 2.5% to 3% again on this end works out well. Thinking back to the revenue side, we came in with slightly higher revenue projections, which helps us. Landing the plane somewhat close, again, economic factors, or under in the prior years helps you again, because now you have more revenue coming in and expenses lower than projected, which then helps you with the fund balance. Just another look at the expense categories year over year by actual. If you go to the next slide, Jamie. This, I think, is a better picture of the same view. Again, you can see the instructional courses. The first 3 years, relatively flat, somewhat slower growth. 22, 23 and forward, it's been a much higher trajectory, more so on the instructional, which means it's in the classroom. Second most followed by the instructional support. Everything else, if I were to draw a line, is relatively flat, with the exception of finance charges. That's based on our variable rate. Okay. Speaking of variable rates, I'm happy to report that we actually no longer have any sort of variable rate debt. This is our fixed portfolio. So as of September 30, 2025, we have $203 million of outstanding debt. I put this chart together more so to show you the call dates. The call dates will come in handy as we look in future projections, as well as rates. Under the current environment, we've taken full advantage of the lower rates, and when possible, we've actually refinanced. We currently have non-callable debt that's at 5%. Everything else is below that. In the most recent filing, we were at 4.25%, so we're right on line with where our actual value should be. Why is that important? Because we plan to go out in January, February timeframe to issue new debt to finish construction at the elementary school in Fountain Hill. So this is just a preliminary chart showing the potential impact as we go out. Of course, if Scott from PFM was here, he'd tell you that the interest rates are not fixed and can vary based on market conditions and all the other safe harbor stuff. For our purposes, we're going to pretend that they're fixed, and we're going to pretend that we've got a wrap structure that works exactly as it's intended. So the new debt will add about $750,000 of interest payments in year one. In year two, that goes to $1,805 because now we have the consistent full year plus the shortage of the next year. And by 28, 29, you're going to look at $2.1 million of fixed payments that'll be above and beyond your payments for today. So just a nice chart to show you that. Of course, we'll wrap it all around. And if you look at the prior chart, the good news is you have some debt flying off in FY30. So while the payments will go up, it'll start to level out. And as we extinguish the debt, it'll be exactly the same payments as we have. That's the beauty of the wrap structure. So moving this into assumptions, and again, following the trend lines, we can, of course, expect salaries to increase based on existing terms of the CBA. We will see health increases, and our projections is 7%. Because we're self-insured, we don't experience the same factor of growth if you were insured. It's below the national average, but 7% is relatively high. We can expect to see charter school tuition at 6.5%. And of course, tuition to Babbitt's, IU, and NCC, they generally increase with the upcoming of the satellite campus for Babbitt's or the factory building. It's likely that we'll have higher enrollments, so those can increase even higher than what we've seen in the historical trend lines. And of course, the $30 million borrowing, which we've already talked about. So if we put that into graph form, you can see the expenses actually have a steeper climb. This is again historical trends. Going to the next slide, we can kind of refresh ourselves on what the revenue picture looks like. Again, somewhat modest growth in the local and state. You can see where I took out all the federal revenue outside of access and kept Title I flat. So all in, you can see 1.5% to 2% growth, roughly $373 million in revenue projected for 26-27. Keep in mind, we don't even know what the state revenue is for current year. So projection. Next slide, Jamie. On the expense front, you can see that the current year budget is built on $373 million. So what we project with growth in terms of 26-27 is actually just enough to cover what we're spending in 25-26. Think of the growth factor, you're looking at about $6 million. Benefits alone at 7%, so better than national average, brings you that $6 million in growth. So everything else above that can cause us potential issues. So what are the takeaways? That chart makes sense. Ultimately, what we're looking at is a surplus deficit. So takeaways for me. We have some levers. So if we make some assumptions, tax base, for example, going up to 3%, that reduces the deficit by about $3 million. Because it's projections, and the one thing we can guarantee is the projections will not be 100% accurate. Want to highlight that the inflation will negatively impact our projections. Any kind of economic downturn, which we've been projecting for 2+ years now, when it comes to reality, it'll definitely decrease our EIT. We can't say we have historically high earnings on investments because the interest rates won't be there to support it. And of course, not knowing what the federal funding will look like, any kind of limitations on the state funding, if it does go status quo, will further strain our local budgets. So reality is, unless we take some action and start managing our, next slide, Jamie, start managing our budgets, and really now's the time to start to act, we're going to lead into a structural deficit situation, which is what we want to avoid. So not the brightest and best picture, but a picture of what we're looking into as we start planning for the budget.
A colorful picture.
I like the green color.
Thank you, Harry. Any questions or comments? I'll just say that's a pretty bleak picture if we don't do something.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Harry for putting the slides together and crunching the projections and the numbers and the best estimates that we have now. That's why November at our committee meetings have been sort of long-range planning ideas. So our enrollment affects our budget. Our long-range capital plan affects our budget. Obviously, our strategic initiatives related to how we manage our money and our budgets matter. But as we've seen in that PowerPoint and every other one, that 2/3 of our expenses are tied up in people. And 90% of our expenses end up into the classroom. So there is no way of closing that deficit in a structural way without some tough decisions on things related to enrollment, capital facilities, staffing levels, which then obviously affect class size. So there's a lot of levers, some of them on the revenue side, that's encouraging, but then some of them are on the controlling the expense side. And that will be the challenge of our board heading into you've heard me say many times that each budget should be a step in a multi-year plan of budgeting and what that looks like to align to the factors that we've been talking about all month. So more to come and more strategic planning to come, but it's always good to know what the lay of the land and what the numbers are telling us. First things first, let's get our budget for this year known so that we can start working on some of the unknowns and some of the strategic thinking that we're going to have to do at the board level. But I want to thank the board and thank Harry for their unflinching, honest view of the numbers.
Dr. Beck-Pulley.
Just real quick point of clarification, that I think this was spot on in terms of projecting ahead our expectations about federal funding, sort of flat Title I dollars, and you've zeroed out Titles II, III, and IV. That again, for sort of impact on our budget, it looks like that's about 1.3 million. I'm trying to do quick math, that we would have gotten from those three streams of funds. Could you just quickly describe what we would have done, or what have we've historically done for a very long time with those 1.3 million federal dollars?
Title II would do a lot of our secure, safe schools and security purchases, equipment purchases. Title III is a big one. That's our English as a second language. So we use that for programming, staffing, language guides, student services related to second language learners. And Title IV is more of a catch-all, but a lot of professional development, things that we've needed for training. We've been able to offset expenses in our budget by having training costs picked up by Title IV. So if that's no longer there, either those training costs have to get picked up by the general operating budget or not, or forego the training. So Title I is usually I'm not hearing as in danger as Title II, Title III, and Title IV. Title I is the federal government's leading anti-poverty program, which goes to helping schools with high need, class size reduction, reading specialists, full-day kindergarten. So again, the expenses that we avoid because Title I pays for it, we anticipate that those expenses will still continue to be addressed by Title I funds when that program continues. But if it went the same way as Title II, III, and IV, that's a big one, because majority of our, a lot of our students are ESL, special education, or students of high need. So we're affecting, it's not like the mandates are going to go away. We'll still be responsible for IEPs. We'll still be responsible for services for ESL students that align to the assessments. So it'll be that what I've tried to describe, Plan B, Plan C, Plan D, and there's real expenses to those.
Thank you.
But I would also add, what you don't see on the projections is the reduction of IDEA funding, which could be negatively impacted, but we don't have a clear view on that yet. That's an additional $2+ million. That doesn't flow through the federal bucket, it's passed through to the IU, so that is still in the budget, but it could very well be reduced as well. And that goes specifically to aid the special needs students.
And that's a big deal, because not to get too many slides ahead, but when we look at personnel and sort of where we've seen the biggest increases in the number of people who are serving our students, the special ed support is a big part of that growth for all the right reasons. And so thank you for adding that to the list of things that we're going to worry about with this year's budget. Thanks.
Dr. White?
This is just more of a general comment and question, not necessarily part of the BASD budget, but this is to Dr. Silva, have we seen some already substantial impacts of the lack of SNAP benefits to our students and family, at least through the community schools and other?
Well, our community schools, especially the food pantries in the community schools, are seeing an increase in business. We tried to drive the philanthropy related to BASD families towards the community school model because it already has an existing infrastructure, communications, delivery systems. I know our foundation has been interested in also collecting funds and then putting it into that system. But yes, there's a general increase related to food insecurity, and then the insecurity of everything else when food takes up that part of your budget. So the challenges are there.
Any other questions? Oh, Mr. Fasano.
Yeah, I'm looking at slide 22, which was the expense projections, and just looking at that 12 or 13-year period from the 1920 school year up until 31, 32, and we're looking at like a little over $200 million increase in expenses, and even the last 5 or 6 years from now into the future is over $100 million in expenses. And I think we've been lucky for a long time that we were able to balance budgets by not really having tough decisions. We all hopefully remember the Corbett years and the out-of-control far-right extremists in Harrisburg and what they did to education. And I don't know how much longer we can continue to balance budgets by just hitting that low-hanging fruit. A lot of it's gone, and we need to protect our class sizes, and we need to have small elementary classes. It's been a paramount of what we do, but there are really, really tough decisions in the next 5 years. And I think it has to start with this budget, and I'm not looking to go crazy or anything that cuts what makes Bethlehem Bethlehem, but we are one election away from a disaster. I mean, if we have a governor now that somewhat supports public ed, and we're still, 6 months beyond a budget. And I can't imagine if a certain party controlled all 3 branches of government, we would have no money, the budget would be passed, we'd have vouchers, those charter numbers would be higher, and it is really concerning, really concerning. So I think we have to be very strategic when we budget and how we plan for the future. 5 years from now, I don't think we could survive without borrowing this far into the budget cycle, almost halfway through the year without borrowing money. So I think we've always had a good, healthy, and worked hard to have a good, healthy financial standing, and I am very concerned that if we don't really take this seriously as a board in the next year or two, that we're going to be in trouble when you look at, the 28-29 or 29-30 budget, because there's so much political uncertainty and volatility, and we have no idea what's going to happen. So I don't know if this was meant to be a wake-up call. I know the last week and this week together really kind of painting a picture of long-term strategic planning for us, but we have a lot of work to do to be able to continue to maintain what we all kind of value and have valued for a long time in Bethlehem. So interested in what some ideas are from everybody on how we can kind of set ourselves up to weather what looks to be a storm coming, whether we like it or not.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I'd just add, I think Mr. Fasano hit it on the head, and I thank Dr. Silva and the administration for last week's meeting and this week's meetings. I think it's a wake-up call. I'm not sure if it meant to be, but I think we really have a lot of tough decisions, and it's something that we can't, rely on our taxpayers anymore to just make up this. It's too big, so we have to really, some tough decisions coming up. It's got to start now, though. I think we got to start planning soon with this budget coming up. Any other questions or comments on that? We'll move on to 3.02, student activity funds, information item.
Yeah, this is information only. We developed a new report based on the policy that we passed a couple months ago, which essentially will be added to the treasurer's report. The layout of the report is the same across all schools. Tells you the school, the club, what the beginning balance, what the expenses, revenues are, and what the ending balance is. So you can expect to see this more or less on the treasurer's report moving forward.
All right. Any questions, comments on the student activity fund?
Just a comment, please.
Yes.
I really appreciate this. This is very robust, and it kind of helps us just understand the activities that make the school district so special, and also the teachers and the students that are part of it. So thank you for this.
All right. Any other questions, comments on that? Then we'll move into the agenda items for November 17th, 2025, regular school board meeting. 4.01, the student activities funds, faculty, club advisors, and student officers. It's just a item that we're going to approve.
Yeah, this is a compliance item. To my knowledge, it's the first time we've brought this forward. Based on our policy that we passed, all the club advisors, the student officers are to be approved annually by the board. So moving forward, you can expect to see a list similar to this. I will say, if you pull up the list, you'll notice some of the names are the same. It's a work in progress as we work to educate our staff members that are running student activities and getting things in order and standardizing across all the schools. So we can expect to see this again next year and recurring year after that.
Any questions on that? Oh, Mr. Fasano.
What is the rationale, or what is the requirement to approve the student officers? I understand the club advisors and the faculty members, but does that open the door for us to get in the weeds and be like, well, I really hate that kid, he's a jerk, I'm going to vote no on that? And what happens if we vote no? Can we overthrow a student president of, the yearbook?
It's an interesting question, but you're not necessarily approving their appointment so much as approving that there is an officer in place. The student activities are the ones that hold their elections, and when we approved 618, we put forward some criteria in terms of what should be elected, and the only requirement is the treasurer so that they can actually manage the finances and use that as a learning opportunity along with the fiscal secretary.
But I guess I still go back to, do we need student name? I don't know. It just seems to open the door for us to get involved in something we don't need to be involved in. Like, do we approve the positions, that these clubs have these elected positions? Like, do we need the student names on them?
Again, interesting question. I don't know if you need the names as board members, but we need the names in the business office because we have to
Okay.
validate the signatures that they're
Gotcha.
authorized people signing off on the check requests.
Okay. I don't know that it would ever come to that, but I would just hate to see a student be discussed at a meeting over something like this.
Could we just use the student's number?
I mean, we could, but
I don't want to overcomplicate it.
I understand.
let me go back and do some work
The
on
reason
whether
is
you want
that
to name.
when auditing takes place of student activity accounts, they look for students to be involved in the budgeting decisions, the spending of funds, and it usually has some type of representation from student leadership within the club. So putting their name shows that we're operating under that. But, if it's easier to just, we use numbers for other things when we want to be delicate around the decision in public. I wouldn't object to using student number.
Yeah, I don't want to overcomplicate it. I was just shocked when I opened this up and saw just, hundreds of students' names here, which we typically don't put in public. Yeah, maybe I'm overthinking it. Maybe it would never, hopefully it would never happen, but I could just see that perfect storm of, why in the heck is so-and-so the treasurer of that club, He had a car accident last week and can't afford gas money, Maybe I'll get out of the weeds now, I'm sorry.
I will do some research and get back to you on what others do, but from the limited we've done, names are published in other school districts. Okay.
Well, I want to support what Mr. Fascinetto is saying, just in terms of public information. It's not so much the board members getting involved. We have to ask permission of parents for students to have their pictures in media. And because we're talking about protecting the student's identity in certain things. So that's my concern more because it's a public document.
Okay. It also caught my attention that the student activity fund we just showed, these different groups have all this money, and then that's the kid in charge of that?
So Mike, you're not supposed to get that low.
Well, I know, but I mean, again, maybe I'm overthinking it. I'm sorry, I'll be
We
quiet.
will get back to you by the time it's time for approval again with the recommended practice.
And Harry, just to clarify, this is a state law, right? That we're
Correct.
following the state law. So just want to make sure that's.
Now, Public School Code of 1949. So it's been some time, but
All right, any other questions on 4.01? Moving to 4.02, inactive accounts for the student activity funds.
so same theme, same policy. These are the accounts that are inactive, and on this list, we took the liberty to put forth the last time that there was activity, the amounts that's left over, and where they're being moved forward. So hopefully this is the last house cleaning item, and student activities along with the report we shared early on will be clean moving forward, and will inactivate as needed, but it won't be anywhere near what you're seeing today.
I actually had a question on this, Harry. When there's the class and they graduated, my understanding, at least when I graduated, was some of our class money would be set aside for a reunion at some point. Is that still a policy?
It's normally class gift.
Okay.
That's how they wipe out the account.
Is that
It's either a class gift or they donate that money to the incoming freshman class as seed money.
Okay.
Again, we're now resetting the policy based on the approval a couple months ago, doing education. So it's a work in progress in terms of what the requirement will be. But according to our policy, we're putting forth that the class at the end of the year will do some kind of donation, whether it be to, buy something, to the next class, to whatever else, but it'll be earmarked before they graduate.
Yeah. And what happens with these funds? They go, when we take them out of the account, they're going into another student
Jamie, if
activity
you
fund?
open it up, we essentially will take the funds that are existing in the account and move them to the account that's on the right. So I can't read that far, but PBIS will go to Student Lighthouse, so that's $60 and change will be transferred to the Student Lighthouse account at Brockwell Middle School, another student activity. And
How was that
student
decided? That's
activity
the question, I'm sorry. How was that decided? Where
How
they
is that decided?
Yeah,
Right now, it's decided based on our policy and in conversation with the principal
okay.
and the student activity coordinator, for lack of a better term, at the school, which is the financial secretary.
Dr. White?
But that club hasn't been in existence since 2017, so to find who it was that ran it and who the decisions are would be nearly impossible. In our policy, we do say it'll go over to student government, which is the broader rule, but because we've had conversations with them, we decided to honor the principal and secretary's wishes.
Okay. Can you just clarify for me, please, the class gift transfer for both Freedom and Liberty, the class of 2025?
Well, the class has to designate it. In this case, they didn't, and therefore it'll be going over to the student activity account. But moving forward, as I said, we're trying to reestablish standards.
Yes.
The practice will be for the class to actually vote on where they want that donation to go, if there's funds left over. Whether they want to pay for an event for the next class, the prom, the picnic, it's their
Yes.
decision, but it
Right.
has to be a student-based decision.
The reason why I'm confused is I remember at graduation, there was an announcement of what the class voted on. Signage? Okay, directional signage. Has that been covered? Or is that project or gift just not really happening?
If that gift was documented and put forward, then yes, we would have to go back and confirm what the spending was on. At this point in time, I have not confirmed.
Thank you. I was actually paying attention at graduation. Thank you.
I think what you're thinking most of the time, Sheila, it's the case of what beyond the class gift is left over. That's usually, for my years, that would always go into the ninth grade to help start the seed money for the next one. But it's not, they're pretty good at spending the things they designate their funds for. This is more for like the stuff that's left over or that they haven't designated.
I mean, it could be a documentation issue, so it wasn't documented, we can't do it.
All right, any other questions on 4.02? Moving on to 4.03, donation from Feed the Children.
This is a donation that came in. Typically, it's handled as the school store. Based on what I'm understanding from the special needs team, the program has changed, so the goods will be coming forward in terms of Feed the Children. So it's just to accept the donation, and then it'll be distributed based on the STEPS program at the high school.
Any questions on that? Moving on to 4.04, donation to Farmersville Elementary School.
Dr. White, this is somewhat similar to what you mentioned earlier. Due to loss of potential SNAP benefits and the DC, we had several parents join in. This is the first of many that I'm expecting that want to donate to those students that are negatively impacted by the reduction of SNAP benefits. And therefore, they want to help either reduce the outstanding school lunch debt or help feed those that are directly impacted. This is specifically for Farmersville Elementary. $2,000 has been received. It'll provide meals for approximately 750 students.
Farmersville is not a community store.
I had a quick, I saw that it was from Novartis, actually, that the donation is from Novartis. I'm just wondering how that came about.
It's actually from a parent.
Okay,
He happens to work there, so the
Oh, I
letterhead
see.
happens to
Okay.
be that, but it's actually from him. It's his personal account. And he's just a concerned resident that lives in that.
because he's using the Novartis letterhead, so that's why I was curious.
Yeah,
Okay.
it is on the letterhead.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mrs. Patrick.
All right, not to get in the weeds here. So this man is donating $2,000, but we're saying that it can help reduce the outstanding school lunch debt. So my question is, if that's what it's being used for, how is that feeding kids? That's just paying down
It's
a bill?
either or.
Okay,
So directly SNAP benefits first,
okay,
but that school is 25% direct serve. So how many of those students are negatively impacted? And if we can't find the students that are negatively impacted, the other option is to use it as offsetting the bill for the students that are either ineligible or haven't applied or in any other way not receiving the free lunch and not paying for it. So it helps eliminate their debt, which then still feeds them. Because it's current year, not past years.
Okay. Because I know just in the past, if there was any outstanding lunch debt, we didn't necessarily go after the families for that. That was something that we kind of,
The district GOB pays for that.
okay. So this could possibly be putting money on like Johnny's account, so Johnny
Correct.
has lunch money. Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions on 4.04? Move on to 4.05, renewal of Time Clock Plus software license.
It's an
questions?
annual renewal of our Time Clock Plus software.
All right, any questions on that? All right, move to courtesy of the floor, 5.01, public comment. Seeing none, move to open forum. Ms. Levy?
I was just thinking about the discussion with the students' names, and I was wondering, is it possible we can just have the first name and the initial of the last name?
It's possible.
So that could be something to think about.
Yep. Very good point.
Anybody else for open forum? Seeing none, we'll adjourn for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Zerbe.
No Nissa tonight. No Nissa.
Her dad was not having a good day. So,
Sorry.
so yeah, she was kind of out of sorts. So she texted me this morning that he was.
Okay, everyone, good evening. Welcome to the November 10th, 2025 Board Human Resources Committee meeting. Courtesy of the floor for agenda items only. Seeing no members of the public, we'll go, any discussion items?
Not tonight.
Okay, some informational items, 3.01 staffing review.
This is kind of like presenting at a conference after lunch, after last week's meeting, Harry's, and then Mike's comment, so I apologize. And again, tonight's going to be a lot of information, a lot of numbers, so I apologize for that. But over the last 2 meetings, you've heard a lot about enrollment, projections, some programming, and budget. Each of those have an impact on the future needs of staffing within our district. Like a cornerstone of the foundation which supports the structure, staffing impacts every aspect of the district. Though not all parts are equal, all are intricate within the staffing, and staffing being the largest part of the budget, as was represented in Harry's pie chart. The impacts on the staffing, and this is just a general overview, that, when we look at student enrollment, we have the trends, which are somewhat unpredictable, but we do have some, they are grounded in past numbers. Student needs could be things such as gifted support, special education programming, and ESL services. Open enrollment, this is a plus and a minus, because sometimes we can use it if there is a building that is kind of on that bubble, in order to honor some of those requests so that we would not have to add another staff member. The minus is where we need those is not always where the people are asking to go to. But again, this is kind of a card the district has to play. And then the attendance catchment areas, that depends on, or is there room for growth within that area? Or is it primarily a walking school or a transportation? And if we would extend the boundaries, how would that impact our transportation services? Also, daycares play into that as well. When we look at programming and philosophies, supports such as reading, math coaches, SEL are all things that impact the staffing, but it's all due to student need. Class size, we're going to talk a little bit in a few slides about class sizes at the elementary, the middle, and the high school. Again, electives at the high school are done through course selection, which will then sometimes dictate where we would need staff, or maybe where we would not need staff. The middle school, we have teaming, which impacts the student and their schedules. And then at the high school, we have block scheduling. Last week, you heard from Mark about the buildings, the age and the size, which sometimes small elementary schools are fantastic, but sometimes they're a drawback because you're sharing staff and moving that. So again, those all play into it. And then there's the utilization within a number of our buildings, because we do fair share through the IU, which we have a number of IU programs throughout the district. And we have to remember that some programs, the square footage per student is much more than a general education classroom. And then when we have the budget, collective bargaining drives some of that, because as was represented in Harry's slides, salary and benefits are a large portion of that. We only have one collective bargaining agreement where it actually defines the number of staff that are required within the contractual time frame. But again, that is in the custodial maintenance, but our building footprint really has not changed over the last decade or so. And then we've talked about the general operating budget and how that, some positions are paid out of the general operating budget. Other positions are paid out of grants. The Access program also picks up a few, but we have been fortunate this year in all of the savings that we saw were all through attrition. If we go to the next slide. We're not here today to dive deep into the weeds about specific positions, but to show data that will be used as we move forward in the multi-year budgeting process. Just for highlights, you can see over the course of time, 2017 to present, where there were slight increases up until this past year, where you'll see that there was a savings of 18 positions. And again, that was all through attrition. There were changes and shifts with using people as different certificates. Again, there was a push to change some of the district-wide positions, some of the coaches. We used their certifications at the elementary level or at the middle school level, and they took over vacancies that had been created through either retirements or resignations. Some of the increases in the 2024-25, again, we looked at special education, some speech, English language learners, and also some building level substitutes. We used an LTS instead of expanding our contractual positions when we needed to expand a classroom. We used LTSs. We've also used a couple LTSs to cover what I'm going to call mid-range absences due to surgeries, and it helps present consistency within the classroom and also does not then deplete our day-to-day substitutes. So that's some of those additional positions in the 24-25. If we move to the next slide, you'll see that these are district-wide positions. You'll notice that sometimes there are percents, and that's because the individual may be divided between different positions and or different funding sources. The bottom couple on this slide are grant funded from Marker Learning down, or paid for through grants at one time. If we move to the next slide, these are our professional staff at the elementary level. And again, you may see some percentages for music. That's because they might be shared between the elementary and the middle schools. If we move to the next with the middle school, again, these are positions that you would find within all of our middle schools. And at the bottom, you'll see that from building sub CSI to the bottom, those are all grant funded. Some of those positions were eliminated this year, such as the RP coach CSI. On to the high school. You'll notice that the bottom from temporary or ESL Title III down are all grant-funded positions at one point in time. But you'll notice that the middle school and the high school up until this year were pretty flat in their staffing levels. But again, these slides were just to show you all the different positions that encounter at the various levels. Not only do we have professional staff, but we also have the instructional meet and discuss positions, and you'll see that those are listed there. Just a point of note, the federal programs, that is not a new position that you'll see, but it is new to the instructional meet and discuss. Prior to last year, that position was incorporated into the non-instructional meet and discuss. So again, we didn't expand, we just moved the position. The next slide is the non-instructional meet and discuss. And again, as positions become vacated due to resignations or retirements, we do evaluate those positions to determine if they needed to be filled. For instance, in range one was the manager of transportation. She retired. We decided that we did not need to fill that position at this time. Some of the other positions, obviously, where you see a decrease was the grants position as well as the communications officer. That has been repurposed into a different one this year that will be coming on board shortly. The next slide is the support staff. You'll see all of the different positions and that are incorporated within this particular group. And again, they span a multiple number of bargaining units. It's not just all wrapped into one. So how do the students play into the equation when we look at staffing? Our current guidelines for elementary are for kindergarten through grade 2, we use a guideline of 20 students per class. And again, that's a guideline. It is not a hard and fast number. And in grades 3 through 5, it's 25 students per class. Elementary is easy because they're all single individual buckets compared to the middle school, which is driven by the teaming concept, and then the high school block scheduling as well as the course selection. That's been a lot of numbers, so I thought I'd throw a little color in here with the chart. I can't quite compete with all of Harry's, but I tried. You'll see that this is the elementary buildings by the 25-26, the number of grades per building. You're going to see in the next couple slides the averages that are in those. That is just the number of classes. And if we go to the next, the slide that is up there, you'll see that the right-hand column talks or shows you all the total number of general education classes within a building. And at the bottom, the totals will show you the total number of kindergarten, grade 1 through grade 5, total number of classes within the district. And these are based off of those guidelines that I showed you in the previous slide. The next slide. Again, these numbers are at a point in time, and the point in time I selected was September the 8th, which is the 10-day drop, which would be the time if we had class sizes that were above those guidelines, where we would look to consider whether we were going to split those or whether we would be adding an instructional assistant in order to assist with the students in those classes. And again, I'm not going to read through this, but it's just for your information. You can see that even though we have the guidelines, most of our classes were below those guidelines, and those are nice numbers, but we also had a couple that are bordering above or at that number. And if I would take the numbers today, those numbers would change. We have some, because of we have the transiency, those numbers do fluctuate on a daily basis. The next slide, again, these are general numbers. Maureen and I sat last week and we ran various filters. We did filter out some of the much larger classes like band and chorus. The middle schools have a lunch class. So those were all removed. We did leave in some of the special ed classes because they would have 5 to 7 to 10 depending on the criteria. So again, these numbers, have some assumptions built in. So where do we go now? How do we use this data in order to plan for the future? It's called position. One of the things that we're looking and implementing is position control. I'm just going to give you a handout in order to show kind of what we're doing in order to ensure that we're not adding staff that are not needed. We're not going over the budgeted amount of staff for a given year. And if we would have to go over the budgeted amount, there's been a process that has gone through. What was started this last spring is we have assigned numbers to every employee. Now, some position managements would have a position number that would be 1 to, in our case, 2,000 plus. But what we did as a start in order to begin this process is each position within each category has a number, and you'll see that it includes the executive cabinet, and you'll notice that position 4 is the Chief Pupil Services Officer, and right now it's showing a vacancy until tomorrow, when then Jody Frankeli will slide into that vacancy, and it will show that all positions are filled. If you go to the yellow sheet, you'll notice that the hall monitors, we know that we budgeted 11 hall monitor positions. And for an example, when we were informed that we were not getting the full amount of our grant funding and we had to eliminate some of the Barackle positions that were funded through that, we looked at Francisco, what skill sets did Francisco have? And he was a hall monitor at Barackle. We looked at this, we had a hall monitor position available, so we transferred him to Liberty, which did not increase our budget, nor did we have to let him go, but we knew we had that. So again, This is a database that's shared among all of the HR departments. So when we're doing things, everybody's in line with that. Going to the cherry colored, you'll notice that even within the instructional assistant category, we break that down into the associate nurses, and they're all numbered. We know that we budgeted 16 positions. We had 3 positions budgeted for ESL, then some positions for regular ed, and then I did not show you all of the instructional assistants because it's many pages when we add the special education, but it's to show you the point, and then when we are filling those positions, we know where an individual is going to go, or if special education is shifting people, they're not just adding somewhere, they're actually being reassigned to a different number, which I will show you in a later slide. In this slide, the blue slide, for instance, we had a vacancy position number 18, which was at Brockle. What happened was we didn't just leave that and fill that with another position. We know that position 18 is associated with Brockle. When Mr. Daughtery bid on the Brockle position, he was actually moved from his northeast position to position 18, and then we posted for position 6. So again, we can track and see how people are moving throughout the system, but to also make sure that we are not hiring extra people that are not needed. So again, this is much more detailed, and I have to thank Karen Eager for putting it together and keeping track of it. But it is one way we can ensure that we are staying within our budgeted amount of positions, and those positions will be evaluated as we are going through the system as they become either vacant now for retirements or resignations, or as they become vacant toward the end of the year when a lot of people retire or resign. We'll be determining if we need those based on student need. Again, it's a lot of information, but thank you. Any questions?
The goal of the presentation was to give the board an idea of where our people are and how we deploy them and what procedures we use to make the decisions of where they go and what the factors are that increase staff or contract staff. So since 2/3 of our budget are our people, our salaries and benefits, this is, as we were talking about in the previous committee meeting as related to budget, a big area. This is where the vast majority of the resources are. The rest of the budget doesn't have nearly enough size to be able to provide the resources to meet the economic gap that we're talking about. So we have to talk about our people, our buildings, our enrollment, our programming, all of that together. And the goal of the committee structure for November was to give the board as much information as we currently have, which is quite a lot. I want to thank Dr. Burris and the HR team, the finance, Harry and the business office. Prior to that, Mitch and Maureen in the enrollment, and JT in the enrollment, and Mr. Stein on our facilities plan. Collecting and having all that information for 2 nights in November in anticipation of budget season is a lot, I know, but the goal was to sort of set the stage for the upcoming conversations.
Dr. White?
Thank you, Dr. Silva and Dr. Burris. If I'm understanding all of the information that is coming to us now in light of getting ourselves ready for some decisions, especially regarding class size and our staff, are we looking to adapt Mr. Erskasian's crystal ball in our enrollment numbers by grade level so that we can see if we need to adjust the class sizes that will then adjust the number of staff per grade level in each school? Is that what we're looking at in a step-by-step projection?
We would look at a number of items. This year we looked at if a building was Low in enrollment, we would actually transfer kindergarten teacher from one building X to building Y where there was a need. So we monitor those numbers. Mitchell Hendricks and I, we meet monthly starting in May, looking at the enrollments and then determining what we're doing. And then as we get closer to school, that number of time in between our meetings goes to about a week to make sure that we are keeping up and we have the staff in the right spot. As far as increasing class size, that is a discussion that is made by all of the executive cabinet, and no decision has been made at this time.
Follow up, please. The timing of those decisions by the executive cabinet, you'll be looking at these factors over the year. Do you anticipate, and this is for anyone in the executive, do you anticipate that we'll be having that kind of a conversation this time around? Or is this something moving forward? You're just kind of emotionally getting us ready for these types of things. I guess I just like, when is it gonna hit, is my question, by enrollment inside.
Every budget is a chapter in a long-range budgeting plan. So yes, the answer to your question is yes. We'll have to have those conversations in the coming budget as well as subsequent, so that we have a plan for what we want the district to look like in 2030. Can't be done all in one year. It has to be done over time, and it involves all of the areas that we've had at committee this November.
So in the similar way to how we were planning on building improvements, et cetera, now physical plant type of things, now we're looking at a considerably different impact type of thing.
Yeah, all those areas are affected.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions? Dr. Shively?
I'm just looking at slide 12, the elementary grade by building. When I first looked at this, it looked like there were a lot more kids in the lower grades than in the higher grades. But is that an artifact of the fact that the class sizes are different?
Yes.
Okay.
When you have 20 and then you're moving up to 25 in grades 3 through 5, you can add 3, 4, 5 students to the other classes, and then you're dropping one overall.
So they're roughly, I know we went over this a little bit, but I was sort of impressed by that.
Yes, and you'll see in that slide represents, there are some buildings with some bubble groups that move through, and there's also one where there's a decline. So again, that's just a visual representation.
I would offer just something that happens pretty frequently is we'll have, let's say, 25 kids in a grade level in a school. So in K1 and 2, that's easily 2 different sections because we have that kind of guideline of 20. And then when they get to 3rd grade, that can become sometimes one section of 25. But when we talk about projections, when Dr. Burris is working with the principals, let's say we're projecting 27 kids in grade 5. Oftentimes, we don't say in March, oh, we're probably gonna plan on just one section of 27. We oftentimes are planning for 2 sections, which are 13 and 14 kids in grade 5. And so that's one of the natures of some of our smaller buildings, is that when we only have 27 kids in a grade level, that's just how the cookie crumbles in those instances.
Larger schools, meaning larger enrolled schools, have more play in being able to manage class size ranges than small schools. A 30 in a small school is guaranteeing 2 sections. That only has 2 sections. That number of students projected over a grade level that has 5 sections is a different story.
Mr. Allozy?
My apologies for coming in late. The question I have is based on what you just, the information that you just shared, Dr. Leeson. So what happens in the way that the cookie crumbles? Let's say you have 27 kids in grade 5. and it was you were initially looking at 13 and 14, or however the math worked out. And you put these kids, it's decided we put these kids together in one class because it just makes the most sense. But in this class you have, and I'm saying this because I know of a class at an elementary school where the teacher has, I think 24 in her class, and 5 of her students are students with extreme behavior needs, and 1 student whom is triggered by all of these needs. And where's the help for when we have to make those executive decisions, and we have to do what's best for the whole group, right? But there's a need for those students who have different learning situations, who are being evaluated, who just, like, it's 27 10-year-olds in one room. So yeah, how do we supplant, or how do we deal with the casual, no, that's not a good word, with the unintended consequences of that, and how do we support a teacher who's having to live that?
We have added instructional assistants, some of them depending if they are identified as special education. We will have Lee Rusnak look at her instructional assistants, and is there somebody that can be moved because they were working with children that no longer are in need of services. We have, over the last 2 years, added some instructional assistants to work with these class sizes where there are larger numbers and a number of behavioral issues. Every situation is looked at on a case-by-case basis.
Generally speak, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Maureen.
I would also add that Dr. Burris begins having conversation with principals as early as February, but those conversations continue every single month. And I would say this year, like right in that late July, early August, we were trying to shore up, let's just do one last check. We've been monitoring the numbers as we go through, and we've been, planning, adjusting, et cetera. But as we're getting ready to send out, here's your homeroom teacher information, we want to make sure we're pretty clean, we're pretty sharp. We don't want to make too many changes after we've put out that communication. And so he's working really hard up until that end of July, beginning of August, and he's having a lot of communication. We do talk to principals. I have one particular situation in mind where, in this particular classroom, we have a child with, significant visual needs, which takes up a lot of equipment and a lot of space. In another classroom, we have a child that has a wheelchair, and there's, mobility around the classroom. And we factor those things into consideration when we're talking about what the composition of that school looks like. That being said, kids have behaviors. And when they present with behaviors, we do our best to support them with the staff that we have. And as needed, Dr. Burris will say, okay, we've got to hire an additional instructional assistant, et cetera.
Generally speaking, Mr. Alozzi, when situations like the one you're describing come up, there are really 3 options the district has. One is to make the class size smaller. So turn a 27 into a 14 and a 13 and reduce the issue that way. If that's not available, you can add an aide in there and try to help with the numbers or more targeted support of those students that need it most. And also an instructional coach sometimes can go in and help affect tier 1 instruction, regular core instruction, to help mitigate some of those issues. Sometimes it could be all 3 of those things. It could be one or the other. But that's what Dr. Burris and Dr. Leeson do on a regular basis. Over the past few years, we've usually erred on the side of creating the smaller class. And I think you see that in the numbers. That's why our target K1-2, our target is 20, but the averages are significantly below those because we use that option knowing that probably is the most powerful lever. But sometimes the behavior may be one that is best addressed instructionally by a coach, or with a one-on-one aid if it's a particular child. So there is no one strategy that you use for those type, but that's generally the effect on staffing of how we approach those.
And if I could add, depending on the building, there may not be a classroom available to split the class.
This school that I'm referencing, that is the issue.
Mr. Fascinato?
Yeah, could we go to slide 14, please, which was the elementary class average? And it kind of goes back to what I was talking about last week and the need to look at how we allocate our resources and how we allocate our students to what buildings. You know, if you look at, and I'll take out fourth grade, because that's the COVID bubble year of holding kids back for kindergarten, not knowing what to do. That's an abnormally large class at schools everywhere. But if you look at like the low end of these ranges, 12 and a half, 11 and a half, 12.7, and then you look at the high end, 19, 21, 22. Look at grade 3. 14.5 is the low average at Hanover. That's a great third grade class. That is a completely different experience for those kids and teachers than the 25 kids in a class at Donegan in third grade. And our high end is significantly 4, 5, 6 students higher than the average, which is concerning because, you know, anybody who has been in a classroom knows like 4 kids can make or break, you know, the atmosphere, the environment of a classroom. So I would really hope that as we go forward, we can kind of take a look at this. I'm not saying all of our staff is working hard and obviously doing their best, but when you look at 25, 26, 23.3, like throw in some special needs students who have some challenging behaviors on top of that, like that is a completely different educational experience for those students, the morale of the teachers, the morale of the staff than it is for the 12, the 11, the 12s on the low end. So, and I get the buildings, I don't want to pick on Calypso, but I see them on there twice. Like, they're a small building, they only have 2 sections, so it is what it is. We're not going to put 25 in a room, and when you break it in half, you're at 12, 12 and a half. But perhaps that's where, you know, playing with some of the catchment areas and moving some, you know, bodies around when it comes to future students could help alleviate the pain for the people on those high ends, because those buildings are high every year. Farmersville's high, Spring Garden's high, Miller Heights is getting there. I'm sorry?
I'm surprised Governor Wolf's not on.
Yeah. Donegan, again, those schools that get more and more population and start to really burst at the seams where there's not much space, but we do have space in some of the other buildings where we can maybe allocate some people there. But some of these numbers were really eye-opening that kind of backed up some of the stuff we talked about last week.
And Shannon, to your point, that is the high number. There could be, you know, if it's 25, the next lowest one could have been 24.5. So I only showed that as the highest average within Donegan. Between all of the rooms, it comes out to 25.
Mrs. Levy?
Yeah, I just want to know, do you seek out aides who are qualified to handle students with issues?
All of our special education instructional assistants have to be what's deemed highly qualified. And if they do not have the credit requirement, we have developed a training program for them to become highly qualified, which goes into working with challenging students and behaviors as one of the components.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Raschuti?
Oh, thank you. Dr. Burris, thank you for presenting this. I appreciate it. When I read this over the weekend, I think one of the things that struck me was this stark differences in some of the class sizes. And I think it goes to the point, I think last week when we heard facilities and we heard the projections for, it goes to the point where I think maybe our district's a little bit large right now and some of our buildings aren't right sized for their areas, and you know, I think it's part of the bigger conversation where we're going to take the data from last week, some of the data from this week, to solve Harry's equation, which is reduce that 90 million in 5 years or 18 million next year. So I'd even say the middle schools were shocking to me too. I mean, you have school, you know, Brockle with 12, 13 kids in a class, and then you have Nitchman with 22 kids. And you know, are we catching all these kids in the right zone? Should we, you know, are we giving an equal education? Are the kids at Brockle getting more one-on-one time with their teacher than kids at Nitchman or East Hills? I think that just adds to some of the conversation. So do we need 4 middle schools anymore? Do we need, you know, I don't know what the conversation's going to be. And I think that goes into those projections, the long-term projections. but it's not an overnight solution. I think it's a pretty big equation we have to solve here, so.
I'm going to hop on that too. I want to point out what Mr. Fascinato said about a student's experience in grade 1 at Eclipso compared to her Farmersville. And obviously, the students are why we're here, but that's also why we're having teacher burnout and teachers not feeling that they're being as effective as they can be when you have double the amount of kids as one of your colleagues. So I firmly believe we have some hard decisions we have to make, not only for our students, but for our staff. Mrs. Levy?
Yes, so I just want to piggyback off of what you were saying with Richmond compared to Donegan or Brocco, you said. When Richmond was built, was it built for room to grow? Whereas, if the class size is too big, then we can create more classes?
Richmond was built for a capacity that's larger than its current enrollment. Not dramatically, but it has a little room.
So there is a possibility, whereas if the class size is too big, we can split it into.
That saves it for facilities needs, but that doesn't save, that increases the cost of staffing. And we cannot get to that number that Harry is talking about without talking about staffing. Because that's 2/3 of our budget.
Mr. Lozey?
I'm so sorry that I missed Mr. Aristocasian's presentation, because I would like to know more about those numbers, because what I'm going to say now will probably not help. As we look to make some decisions and see what needs to be done, and we look through that with an equity lens, because this district has made it its focus and its pride in doing everything we do as best as possible through that lens. We want to be mindful of making sure that if we're doing that, we're meeting the needs of our students. And so I know we're not making decisions now, but when it comes time to make those decisions, I would hope that there's a lot of feedback going on here. I would hope that how that is discussed is an actual discussion with all of us, so that there's input that is meaningful in real time. Because one of the things I foresee is that if we're which I know we're not saying that we're closing schools or we're deleting classrooms, but there may come a time in the lifespan of the district where that, this used to be a school. It is not anymore. We know that happens. But if we're doing that, how do we make sure that we're fair to those students? And if so, how do we explain to the taxpayers that, hey, we're trying to save money, but we need to put an aide in every classroom, because we want to make sure that the learning experience for every child, as we maximize learning per square foot, was that the thing in the Fountain Hill? Yeah, yeah. As we maximize learning per square foot, we want to still be equitable. We're not putting 24 7-year-olds in a classroom without an aide. We're not doing that. And we're agreeing that we're not doing that. And the public knows we would not do that to their children, right? So those are the things I want to make sure that when we're doing that, we realize that we can't make one decision without the other.
Yes, I think in future discussions, you'll see that equity is a variable. Quality of educational programming is a variable. The building utilization is a variable. There's a lot of, it's like Rubik's Cube. There's a lot of pieces that are going to have to get turned to find the right solution of it. But equity is definitely one of them.
Any other questions or comments on this? Okay. Dr. Burse, anything else for information items tonight? No?
No, I think that was enough.
Okay.